So I just wanted to let everyone know that for the longest time, before Alex and I became friends, when I thought of Alex Chee, I thought of a cold and unforgiving grave. The fact that I paired him with this image is completely his fault. In 2006, I don't know if you remember this, you came to University of Michigan, you visited there, and I was in the audience, and Alex was reading from his then novel in progress, The Queen of the Night, which later became, critically acclaimed and a national bestseller. And in that excerpt, you read about a young girl. She was growing up in a farm, and she had lost her entire family to the plague. And the scene was her digging a grave for her mother during winter, and also building her a coffin. And I remember just sitting there and thinking, I had three thoughts. Number one, who is this Alex Chee? Number two, how do I get to know this Alex Chee? And number three, how do I get rid of this chill down my spine? And even that, and then you had you'd worked on that novel for 15 years. Is that right?
I was describing this process for a friend who's in the audience. I started writing it in 1999, 2000, after I had just finished the draft of Edinburgh, and I had sent it off to my agent, and she had said to me, they're going to want to know what's next. And I was really surprised, and I had been thinking about something for a long time. And then I woke up pretty much 2 weeks after she had said that to me. I'd been doing research and thinking about things, and I just had this voice in my head that was talking to me I wrote the pages that are near the end of the novel then, and I remember thinking okay, we're starting, it's happening now. But then everyone became so interested in The Queen of the Night that they didn't want Edinburgh, which was the novel that I was sending around, my first one. And it reminded me of when my mother had told me a story about going with a friend of hers to an audition for being a flight attendant. And they wanted my mother and not the friend that she had gone to the audition with. She was just there as support. And so I was sort of if you want the pretty sister, you have to take the weird queer sister first. That was more or less my approach to it then. And I think I put it aside. It took 2 years to try and find a publisher to Edinburgh, and I think The Queen of the Night, sort of as an idea, just acted as a spoiler. People were looking at this one novel they felt was too difficult and thinking whatever they wanted to think about this other novel that was unwritten but seemed, possibly ideal. And so I just thought, well, fine, I won't write it ever. And so I put it away for years, and I didn't come back to it until 2004. Dave Daly, who's now at Salon, back then he was doing a special issue of the Hartford Courant Sunday magazine, and it was an issue devoted to material that writers had in drawers. And so there was David Gates contributed, and Jane Ann Phillips, and so I was I will definitely be in this issue. And I said, I have something in drawer for sure, so I went back to The Queen of the Night out of all the stuff that I had, took a look at it, and I thought, I really like this. And it was actually the scene that you're talking about, yeah. So I sent that in, and he loved it, published it. I'd done all this without consulting my agent, which is I don't recommend. And so I then just sort of sent the issue to my agent, who I think was so excited about what she read that she forgot to be mad at me for doing that without consulting her. So that sort of put me back on the path.
And it was so beautiful. That particular scene was so beautifully written. I mean, it's been 12 years since that reading. I mean, I've had a child since then, and the fact that I can still almost verbatim tell you, like scene, like detail by detail, and that I think that's a testament to your writing. That's the best praise you're ever going to get out of me.
And this is true.
Yeah, this is my students can attest to this as well. And so I think the thing about your writing that is the most intriguing is, and even in your nonfiction, I mean, to me, there's not that much, like his fiction and nonfiction is so porous. I can see the connections between the two. And his latest book, well, you should read all of his books, but this is a must read. This is undeniably, you will read lines in here that'll make you just go, yes, 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 yes. Many sort of beautiful aphorisms that will confirm or what you had been thinking about all along. And this book is a great representation of the true polymath that I think Alex is. So can you talk a little bit about how this book came together? You write about many different topics in here. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I've seen some reviews that call it a memoir that I think are a little ambitious for it, and I hope not going to mess things up for me. Because it's not particularly a memoir. It is an essay collection, and it is something that I started out putting it together in 2015. I had turned in the draft for the final draft for The Queen of the Night, and it's that sort of eerie period after you turn it in and you're waiting for it to be copy edited and to see all the horrible things that you have left undone that were blind to you because you were exhausted. But you have to do something so that you don't go crazy.
Right.
And I've been invited to speak at Columbia's nonfiction program, and the person who issued the invitation, Liz Harris, said to me, just send me some of your favorite things, because I had said, I don't have a book. I'm really honored, but I have no book for this. So as I was putting the favorite things list together, I started to think, this could be like a collection.
Mm-hmm.
So I sent that list to my agent, and there was links to essays that were all online, and she put them all in a Word document and sent it back to me and said, "Here's your collection. What's missing?" And
oops! I wrote a collection of essays.
But I was also doing my tenure case at the time, and so going through everything, I realized that I had 70 essays.
Oh my God.
That I'd written over 20 years, and also I had many essays that were unfinished. So like a third of the book is essays that had begun, but had never been finished, or that I just simply had left in my drawers. Like Girl, 1989.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
The Guardians, autobiography of my novel. Those were all unfinished. The last one, On Becoming an American Writer, which is, I think, and so it's something that I try to parse through in that last essay, where I try to think about why I kept giving up on these, and then why I have finally finished them.
Right. Your drawer must be gigantic. But I mean, I think it's interesting how, sometimes we, is anyone a film buff here? Who did the movie, The Conversation? Who did that? Say that again? Yes, Coppola, that's right. And I remember reading somewhere that was his side project after he was just taking a break from The Godfather. He was just like, oh, I need something really easy. And he makes the conversation. And it's actually, I actually find that the conversation to be a far more superior movie than any of the Godfathers. But, and so you have this collection, you put it together, it's out now. And if you read the collection, you'll see, when I say he's a polymath, I actually mean it in a very true, like traditional Renaissance period definition of a polymath. His interest and his thirst for knowledge, I'm sorry, I'm talking as if you're not here. Your interest and thirst forget about him. His quest for knowledge is just, it's so wide-ranging. Architecture, a quest for knowledge and knowledge of, right? Architecture, art, music. You used to be a singer, you were a painter. He writes poetry as well as nonfiction and fiction. He could probably give you a lecture on just about 20 topics right now without any preparation. So I guess my question is, why are you so awesome? And how did you get this? How did you get this awesome? So academic.
Well, first of all, thank you. I mean, I think I remember, this is making me think of this conference I had with a gifted and talented teacher in the 7th grade who was trying to warn me that I had a very broad field of knowledge about many different topics, but it was not like, I was not an expert at any single thing. And so it was his way of warning me that I needed to become an expert on something. And I remember, I'm a very contrarian person, and the child version of me was like, I'm gonna become someone who has a broad and deep field of knowledge. I think for myself at the time, I thought, like, you're my gifted and talented teacher, like, you're ignoring what I'm actually good at. And you're not even, like, it was after that I began a homework protest in his class and got flunked out because I was like, I don't want to deal with this guy anymore, get me out of this program. It's really what I did.
No, we believe
you. I think a lot of it is just sort of, part of it is just curiosity. Part of it is, I suppose, having a promiscuous mind. I think it was just really also like, part of it is just being a reader, just reading a lot of things.
Right.
And having parents who would support me in whatever I was interested in, which may have, I think they were, I think the way that they raised me is not so unusual now.
Right.
But I remember at one point thinking about how I was going to karate, clarinet, choir, swim practice, and I was thinking, like, are they trying to raise Batman? And then as I was having this realization, I looked down and realized that I was wearing a Batman t-shirt. And,
yes, Batman.
And then I was like, confronted with this different idea of myself, which, I was thinking, like, well, that must be why I like Batman so much. But, I think for me, it feels very ordinary to know, to pursue knowledge about different things, right, especially through reading, and then.
Well, that's the thing is, I
don't feel strange.
I feel like you're really great at knowing, like trying to know, like that's your expertise, and that's your.
Thank you.
And I use actually the gerund knowing instead of knowledge, because I feel that there's something about your work. I feel like it's a verb. It's not a noun. It's the knowing, right? Characters wanting to know things. Characters wanting to suppress their knowledge of knowing things and knowledge of other things. I should tell you, I read his work. So I read and reread his book. The way I did it for this, to prepare for this interview, is I would read portions of this essay collection, and then I would stop, and then I would reread portions of his 2 other novels, and then continue reading. So I would essentially, I was reading them all at the same time, or rereading them at the same time. And
wow.
It's like the Matrix. I see so many connections that I don't have the time to tell you all about them. But I feel as though I had done it like a psychological analysis on Alex. But so I won't bore you with that. It's really interesting psychology. But so with all of this wide range of knowledge, and not to mention he used to be a professional tarot card reader. He just told me about, what was the other job that you just told me about?
Makeup for gay porn.
Yeah, just, makeup for gay porn.
There's makeup.
And so how do these different, how does music affect your writing? How does your art affect your writing? How does writing affect, your thoughts on architecture? Can you talk a little bit about the interplay?
The first short story that I wrote to get into Phyllis Rose's Fiction 1 class at Wesleyan, I remember looking it over and realizing that I had done something similar to an exercise from a drawing class that I had taken the year before when I was trying to be an art major. And in that exercise, we took figure studies that we had done with models from three different figure studies, and we had to combine them in a single fictional tableau. So, put the figures into a relationship with each other that they didn't have in life, and that actually, I guess I think of it as an example of the ways in which doing one thing helps me do the other thing, or at least helps me understand how I did it, even if I didn't officially use that prompt.
Right.
And it's part of why I often encourage my students now, when I teach them, to use any art form they like and respond to as a generative prompt for writing, because I think that just is more normal. That we are often responding to different kinds of art, and we're not trying to codify it or think about our reaction to it so much until maybe later. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. But music was similar, I think, in the sense that I do think that part of why I became a writer was that I had lost this. I had a singing voice as a child that there was a 3-octave soprano range, and then it was gone with puberty, and I was devastated, and I hated my adult singing voice. Only recently have I come to appreciate it with, my husband is, he loves karaoke. That's what I'm trying to say. So now I have been singing karaoke we've been together almost a decade. So I was doing some karaoke occasionally before then, but with karaoke you often try to sing the song that you love that is not necessarily the song that suits your voice. So you're like, I can sing that. And you get up there and then you're like, So my initial karaoke attempts only confirmed for me that I didn't really have an adult singing voice. Only when I was singing with my husband was he like, you should just pick something that suits your voice. And then we started to
He said that lovingly, didn't he? Yes.
And then we started to do karaoke rehearsals at home, sounding the songs out, syncopation, that kind of thing.
Oh my God.
And those that all. It's and now I want to write a karaoke musical.
Oh my God. You heard it here.
I was thinking about this because
idea.
La La Land, for example, a lot of people liked it for some reason, and sorry if you did. And then a lot of people did not. And one of the things that bothered me about it as a film was it didn't seem to use the music narratively in the way that musicals are supposed to. In the recent episode of The Magicians, we had this brilliant rendition of Pressure, Under Pressure.
David Bowie.
Yeah, and in which the cast is singing it from different parts of the story together, and it becomes narrative in all these different ways as the stories that they've been occupying like sync back together. You've been watching them in different storylines across different timelines and different worlds, and then it's unified by the way they sing the song. That's how you do a musical, and a musical number narratively. So yeah, I'm probably gonna write a karaoke musical at some point. But I think this kind of thinking is, to me, the pleasure of making art and of being around artists. It's the pleasure of when you remember when we were at the McDowell Colony together, like we're there with like visual artists and composers and dancers, and it's you never know like what amazing thing someone's going to do, like after dinner or during the meals.
And it's so nice to immerse yourself in those other fields, and it really helps. I call them cognate fields, and it really helps you see your own work with a different perspective, right? The best advice somebody gave me was actually the story that you read of mine at University of Michigan. He loved it, so in that moment I thought, yay, I'm going to be a writer. I'm going to make some money. And then the next visitor who came, a very big name, also, I will not mention who that is, but she literally looked at me and said, do you want to continue to be a writer? I mean, that was, she read the same story. And I realized at that point that there was something wrong with that story, but I could not identify what it was, and neither could my classmates. And so somebody gave me the advice to go take a theater class, a playwriting class, and I adapted it into a play, a one-act play, and then it was so clear as soon as I did the adaptation what was wrong with the piece. So, and I fixed it as the play, and then I took that repair, put it back into the story, So sometimes, having a different genre helps you look at your work differently. In your essay, I'm going back to the whole polymath thing because I'm actually obsessed that he's actually our current, like a Renaissance man, and we need to sort of talk more about that. But in your essay, The Curse, which is in the first essay in this book, you are writing about your time as a foreign exchange student. You're 15 years old, right?
Living for the summer in Mexico.
Right.
Tuxtla Gutierrez, and it was a funny exchange program in the sense that, and I actually was with not the student who's in that story, but like the next exchange student we had.
Yeah.
We were laughing about the program because the Mexican students, when they came to the U.S., had to take American classes, but when the American students went to Mexico, we didn't have to take Mexican classes. We just stayed in the homes of our hosts and then went on field trips. And so I was basically just like home, like watching telenovelas with the cook, Panchita, who was great and would make me little treats in the kitchen. And we were watching this show, El Maleficio, which is translated as The Curse, which is the title of the essay. And I realized gradually that I was understanding what the people in the TV show were saying, and that I had finally, like, it was some sort of weird class in Spanish that just involved watching a lot of Spanish language television, but that I wanted to know what they were saying because they were all witches, and I was obsessed with witches at the time and witchcraft, and it was, yeah.
Well, he could probably give you a lecture on witches too. He knows a lot about it. But anyway, in that particular essay, he's brought himself some books with him, Dune, and he's reading books on Sherlock Holmes, and what was the Encyclopedia Brown, and Batman, and all of this stuff. And there's a part, and there's a little line there where he says essentially, these characters who go from ordinary people they transform into heroes because they have this power of observation. And it's through observation, and he as a 15-year-old is wondering, could I also have that power, get that power by observing closely, by noticing things that other people might miss. And of course I couldn't help but think of that as part of writing, because writing is essentially observation plus, knowledge plus observation, and then actually expressing your thoughts. So can you talk a little bit about writing and power? Or powerlessness, if you...
Sure. I think, when you're young, you feel constrained by the people who are educating you and taking care of you. And you long for power. As a result, you become a kind of tiny tyrant.
I have a 4-year-old.
Or would-be tyrant, And in my case, I was trying, in other essays I talk about, trying to learn witchcraft, fortune telling, experimenting with parapsychology, all these modes of trying to have more power than I had at the time. And so the realization that I had through, reading these things,
right,
that I described in that essay was that, there's a completely ordinary path to power, which is just noticing stuff, And so that's what I became obsessed with that summer, was how to notice things, as it were. And I do think that's part of the way that we write and tell stories is the way in which we control context for the reader and describe them for the reader. Right. So you're creating a path through the different contexts of the narrative that shifts and changes for them in ways that create tension and provide catharsis, and it's a fascinating way to think about structuring something, for me at least, and I never get tired of it.
So you mean sort of the power dynamics between you and the reader, and that's how you're structuring?
Between me and the reader, between me and the culture, between the reader and the culture, between the characters that I'm describing, and so on. It's I think I'm doing it even now in my new job at Dartmouth. There's a lot of things that people will tell you, and then there's a lot of things that people will not tell you. And so you are always reading contexts as a result, which is something that I got in the practice of early on in life when I was trying to figure out why things were the way they were, because I was unhappy with them. Right. And so it's just a continuous process for me of of thinking through that. Even in, say, The Queen of the Night, for example, my character is in Second Empire France, which I had to educate myself on. I remember a reviewer who interviewed me about the novel. She was convinced that I must have had spent some time in the French education system, and I was like, no, not at all. And I asked her why, and she said, you're just so aware of the way social class operates in French culture. And I was like, well, I do speak social class better than I speak French, which is just the ways in which people enjoy having power or don't have access to power, or
I mean, this is a recurring motif and theme of all of your works, I think. It's power and how power and powerlessness manifest, which leads me to my next topic. In his essay, this one essay is called Girl, and I love this essay so much. It's a time when he puts on makeup, and this is San Francisco, in the 90s, 89,
Yeah,
still
it was,
89 or still 90?
Halloween in the Castro, 1990.
1990, and he puts on what you tell it. You put on a wig and makeup, and
I got myself dressed up in drag for the first time, and
he is stunning. I wish we had a picture. I mean,
and to my surprise, I was really happy with how I looked. And not only that, I was happier with how I looked than I had been maybe for a very long time. And so it was this uncanny sensation of both seeing a face on myself like that for the first time, feeling happy about it, and trying to figure out why. Like, what was the reason why I felt so at home
yeah.
looking like that?
And there's a line in there where this person that he's, is it Fred? You were dating?
My boyfriend Fred
Fred,
at the time,
that he was
yeah.
dating at the time, and Fred sees Alex dressed up for and just the gaze, that the focused attention that Fred gives to Alex, and there's a moment where in the essay where Alex says, and he felt so much power in receiving that gaze, and he wondered, what else can I make Fred do that I couldn't do before? And again, I'm bringing this up essentially because it's, we have a wig and we have makeup, we have masks. Masks is a recurring motif in all of his work, in Edinburgh and the Queen of, and so I'm really interested in your relationship with masks and what that means for you literally and figuratively. And, to me, it's always a way of revealing and hiding at the same time. It's, you're choosing to reveal certain parts of yourself, but you're also hiding simultaneously another part of yourself.
Yeah, this beard is a mask. I grew it because I was tired of being treated like I was younger than I was. And I noticed also that when I would go on job searches that I was more likely to be hired with a beard than I was without one.
I need a beard.
That it conveyed some kind of authority somehow that I didn't have without it.
Mm-hmm.
It's its own kind of drag,
Yeah.
like the wig that I put on that night and the
Right.
lipstick and there's a way in which we are all who we agree to be socially inside of the relationships that we have with our employers, our partners, our family, and then we have all these other selves out to the side who may hope to be acknowledged at different times, and that's part of what you can do with fiction writing is to let them out for
Masks
some
and such.
fun.
Yeah.
It's also why there's Halloween, I think, as well as masquerade parties, which were certainly, that was part of the fun for me in writing The Queen of the Night, was writing about this time when it was like people would put a lot of effort into their masquerade costumes
Right.
for these balls in Paris.
Well, you say in an interview that this is how they communicated with one another. Their attire is essentially a form of communication.
We are all, yes,
Yeah.
always communicating with each other, in
Right.
fact, through how we dress. And,
Right. Do you like my dress? I dressed up just for you.
I do.
Okay.
It's fantastic.
But I mean, this is a mask, essentially, right?
It's a code.
It's a code,
It's a message.
yeah.
It's all these
Yeah.
kinds of things. Yeah. And it's fun. It's not like, I don't know that it's terrible. I
Right.
think that that's part of what I hope at least comes through in the books is that this kind of movement between identities there's pleasure in it.
Yeah. I feel like all of your books, if you could teach a course on, all of your books, just looking at the themes of identity right there.
I've sworn to never teach my own work.
Oh my
but
God, no. Don't do that.
I don't want to be the professor who
Don't
teaches his own
do
books.
that. Run away from those professors who teach their own work. That means they didn't plan. They're being very, very lazy when they do that. Yes. It's like you're the only one who does that thing, that you have to teach that thing. Right? You haven't done it, right?
No,
I'm just
I think
kidding.
it's better. It makes more sense if you're a scientist.
Yeah.
I'll just say that.
Okay, all right. I mean, that's the thing is I feel like writing is essentially a way of controlling what you reveal and then what you choose not to reveal.
Right, so that moment when I was drag, I realized there was a power in being observed that was a different power from observing.
Yeah.
That like, and then, another one of calling it a job is really a weird thing, but like I was also doing go-go dancing during the period that I was in drag. And
I did not know this about you.
Yes.
Oh my God.
And part of what I loved about it was this fantastic way to watch everything that was happening in the club, but also the way in which you could watch people watch you.
Oh yeah.
And learn about like how your self-presentation affected them. And,
Right.
I mean, I'm sure none of them were thinking that when I was dancing on the bar.
They were not thinking
in
of identity
fishnets.
politics while you were dancing on the bar?
I don't think anybody was, but maybe they were.
I feel like you and I have had so many different weird jobs, but it's at the opposite ends of the spectrum. I feel like you've had the fun, weird jobs, and I've had the most awful, like, I had a job once where my entire job, this is when I was a runaway, my entire job was sitting in a blank room with a fold-out table and one fold-out chair, a scale, and a bag of, what is that called? Cubic zirconium, CZs. And a pincher. My job was to weigh each one and to write it down.
That
yeah.
is,
See, it's the opposite of the
that is
go-go
terrible.
job. I wish I had been a go-go dancer. Isn't that the worst, like, weird job that you can think of? Anyway, so again, this sort of like writing and power, and there's also this powerlessness that I thought we could talk a little bit about, and how people react to your writing, especially when you write about, he was and is a political activist. And he writes about, when you take a stance like a political stance, you can't really control how people will react to you and to it, right? So, I mean, how do you deal with that?
Well, I think there's a difference between being a provocateur, where you deliberately hope to antagonize on a particular subject, and being someone who just tries to articulate the thing that everyone is thinking but no one is saying, which is where I more often live. I think it's partly just being like an older brother, or being the person in your family who is the loudmouth and no one in the family wants to say the thing, and it's sort of like this pressure builds up in you, and you say the thing and you get in trouble, and it becomes your role, like the person who gets in trouble for saying the thing that everyone is not supposed to say, but that also everyone is hoping that you'll say, because someone needs to say it. And it's even in public, there'll be like somebody, like I'll be on a plane and someone is listening to music without their headphones on. And
What is that?
I know,
I've
it drives me
noticed that.
freaking crazy. And so, like,
When did we
I will
know
go
this?
over and say, like, can you put your headphones on? And then everyone will say, thank you so much.
Right.
And and I'm like, why was it me? Like, why did I have to be the one to do it? And that's like a very ordinary interaction. But like, in another way, I see the political writing that I do, or I mean, I think of all of my writing as political, but the explicitly political writing that I do, I see is related to that. Like,
And I think we were talking about this before. I mean, I think to see a Korean American writer saying the things that, I'm just too. I've written so many nonfiction pieces, and just before I sent them to my editor, I've actually just deleted them, and I wrote to them, "I'm sorry. I know I told you I would give you this essay, but I actually cannot." Hit the send button, because I know that as soon as I hit send and then they publish it, somebody will know something about me, and I don't want that. I really don't want people, I hide, to me, my fiction writing is my mask. I hide behind it, I love hiding behind it. To do this thing this other thing, this nonfiction writing, to me, it's completely frightening for me.
Isn't it also the case, though, that it's not just that you're hiding behind that, it's also that that mask makes you feel powerful.
Sure.
And gives you a way to speak in a way that...
that is true.
That's really the part of it. Like, you know, when I teach the comics and the graphic novel, I often ask my students to just like take a mask and go out in public on a time that it's not Halloween. Like, and just see what happens, you know, because it's a kind of it's a commonplace of the comics, you know, the superhero who puts on a mask to fight crime, or the villain who puts it on to commit crime. But there's something that feels really kind of crazy when you put that mask on and go out in public at a time that's not sanctioned for the mask.
Right.
And that's always fascinating to me, you know. But I think, you know, as a writer, you're always looking for those choices that make you feel like you have more to draw on and not less, I think, you know. And so you know, I mean, I would also just, I think it's important to admit that, like, at this time politically, it's also the case that, like, it's much harder. Women who speak out are treated much more viciously than men by the public, and women of color in particular on social media. You know, so like, any apprehensions you have are not like, you're not being paranoid. People are really screwed up, you know, and doing awful things to each other. You know, whether
horrible.
It's being doxxed and having your address published, or death threats, or, you know, like Daniel Jose Older, who just hit the New York Times bestseller list with his Star Wars book, is being targeted by right-wing extremists on Amazon who are giving his book 1-star reviews just because he is a politically outspoken Latino.
Right.
And it's, so there's definitely like ways in which people are paying real prices for speaking out, and something that all of us have to think about as we stand up and support each other.
Right. I try to do this. I mean, first of all, I very much appreciate you speaking up, and I think we talked about a little bit about this. His kind of speaking up is I don't necessarily feel that he's speaking up because I can't. It's more that he's speaking up and he's creating more room for other people to speak up. And it's an important distinction that I think we talked about earlier.
I don't want to be a senator for like Korean American queers. That's not my role. But I do want to be someone who makes space for them, for all of us to do more than we are doing now.
Yeah. I was also thinking about, do you guys know about this public debate that's happening between Cornel West and Ta-Nehisi Coates? I mean, it's really fascinating, isn't it? Because I respect them both, and they're having this just awful, this is what West says about Coates. He says, "Who's the we in We Were 8 Years in Power? When's the last time he's been through the ghetto and the woods to the schools and indecent housing and mass unemployment?" So that's essentially I feel like what he's saying, he's calling Ta-Nehisi Coates essentially a black elitist, and that he's not in the streets. He's more book-based knowledge rather than experience-based knowledge. I have my opinions and my rebuttal for that, which I like to keep to myself. But there's this, I just feel like at this point you kind of can't win in some ways. You publish something, you say something, and somebody's going to attack you from both sides. It's almost like,
Well, I don't know if that's really...
Is that not true? That's just...
Well, I don't know if it's not... I think what I would say is like, it's important to remember that self-censorship is a conservative value. And so if you end up censoring yourself before anyone else does, that you're essentially like collaborating with conservatism as it exists now.
Oh, God.
Like,
Well, that blows.
so it's just something to
Who
like,
just snapped her finger? That was you.
that like, you know, it comes down, I think, in the end to, you know, at least if you've spoken out, you have indicated that you have a position in relationship to
Right.
what's happening versus what if you don't, then they'll say that you agree with them,
Right.
you know, or they'll say that your position doesn't exist, you know, these kinds of things. I think that,
Yeah.
you know, the Cornel West, Ta-Nehisi Coates argument it's been painful to watch, I think, for a lot of us, but,
Right.
you know,
It needs to happen.
well, it was going to happen.
It was going to happen.
Is maybe more what I was going to say, and I'm sure that Coates right now is sort of, I think, pulled
He went
back and
offline, yeah.
he's gone off Twitter. I'm curious what he'll do next.
Right. I was just given the signal, and I don't know if the signal means 10 more minutes or. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, let's open it up.
As in right now. Before we do go into the the fun part of the event, I do want to I feel like it's important for the audience to know what your life was like, because I'm sure there are some writers and artists out there who are starting out, what your life was like before, you know, Seth Meyers interviewed you, before all of your books became critically acclaimed, before you got your professorship at Dartmouth. Can we sort of give a little bit, just a snapshot of the struggles that you went through as a writer?
Well, I guess I do try to provide that in the book. I think there's the thing that I would probably want to, I was a reader, an obsessive weirdo reader who then eventually started writing things, and I was encouraged a great deal as a student, which I think was good, and that was not my struggle. I think my struggle came later when I tried to publish my first novel. So it was this kind of weird way in which all of that encouragement had somehow not prepared me for the stamina I needed in my adult life to face down rejection, which I think writers work with maybe as much as language, you know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so you just have to, like, you know,
Right.
not take, if you can, you have to not take rejection personally exactly, even though sometimes it might be personal. But you just have to remember that when you find the people who get you, that you have to focus your energy and attention there and not overvalue the people who are rejecting you.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
That's sort of my advice to anyone who's starting out right
Starting
now.
out,
Don't overvalue the people who reject you.
No. I remember in workshop at the University of Michigan, somebody in workshop said, "Why is your character Korean?" And I was taken aback by that comment.
Yeah, which is like saying to you, why do you exist?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
That's what the translation to that
yeah.
is to me.
And I remember talking to this person about it after a workshop, and I said, I just want to let you know that I will be listening to your comment. I will be thinking about your comments. I'm going to take that question not as a rhetorical question, but I'm really going to think about why my character is Korean. But I also, I asked her if she could think about would she have asked this question if I were white and my characters were white? And I think the answer is no. Here's the part that I don't know what you were assuming, but the person who actually asked me this question was Asian, and that was even more upsetting. And I think she herself was going through some, struggles about writing Asian characters, and in all of her work, the race was just not identified at all.
Yeah, I have a lot of students who who do that for a while, that sort of race blindness, and it's about that anxiety, I
Yeah.
think, and I try to coach them gently into like, where is this person from? What are their parents like? Where are their parents
eat?
from? You know, like it's a kind of because no one is not thinking about that.
Right. So yeah, don't listen to the, or really listen to them. Either don't completely ignore them, or genuinely listen to them and try and figure out, what they're actually asking. Somebody actually in that workshop said, you have to just give her, if you're gonna make her Korean, then just do more Korean things. Have her do more Korean things. In my mind, I was thinking, if someone says that I have to put in a kimchi recipe in this book, I will punch them. Yeah, that's it. But anyway, now we're going to open up the floor.
Yes.
Please ask away.
Just don't ask that question.
Don't ask that
any
question.
other question.
First question's in the
Question
front row
over
there.
here.
Oh my God. Hi, thank you.
Hi.
My question is, when you're writing fiction, that there is an autobiographical component, how do you handle it? Okay, I'm going to try not to ramble here. Let me back up and say, sometimes for me as a writer, when I'm writing something that has an autobiographical component, it's really hard for me to see what's good for the story because I remember what really happened. And I feel so emotionally attached to real things that have happened. It's quite difficult to distort it enough so that I'm really taking care of that storytelling aspect of it. And I was just wondering if you have dealt with that, if that is, you have a trick for that, if you, any advice at all. So.
I think the first thing I try to do is I try to summarize it in the third person, so that I have a short summary of what I think the story is about, or what I think that scene is about, so that I can strip it down a bit into its specific elements, and it's not so overwhelmingly this thing that happened to me. I think it's very much the case that people are able to write about something in the third person that they may be uncomfortable writing about in the first person. So it's always useful, especially when you're writing about anything that has to do with violence, trauma, abuse. The next piece is to think about the different people in the scene as characters and ask yourself, like, what is the story that brought them into that situation and what takes them out? And so then you have more of a sense of it as an intersection of stories that are connecting in that moment, and less of a focus on like what happened to you, And then out of that, you ask yourself, who is the most interesting character to see this from? Because it may not be you. Like the event may be fascinating and have its own power to describe, but your perspective on that may not provide the story. So that's the way that I interrogate that kind of a scene when I'm trying to make use of it. Sure.
We have a question over here.
This will actually be our last question, but if yours didn't get answered, feel free to ask it in the book signing line in the back of the room.
Happy to answer your questions back there. Yeah.
You done? Okay. Oh, okay. All right, was there a hand over here? Okay.
Thank you very much. I'm going to be very quickly. I love San Francisco. I don't know how much time you spend in San Francisco. Can you tell me or tell us how San Francisco shaped your writing, your intellect?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I understood that exactly.
He loves San Francisco.
Oh, San Francisco.
Yeah, and he wanted to know, and he knows that you've spent time in San
Right.
Francisco. How has San Francisco shaped your writing and your intellect?
I think San Francisco was like this. I was like finishing school for queer punks when I was there. So it was this amazing period where all these people were there at the same time that have since gone on to other places, and we were all hanging out. And at the time, it didn't seem, we weren't thinking like, well, this is going to work out really well. Like we were just having fun and trying to survive and teaching each other how to survive. But that 2 years there left this huge imprint on my life, and people like the performer Justin Vivian Bond, the choreographer Miguel Gutierrez, the visual artist Nayland Blake, Kevin Killian, the writer, Corey Sika, now the editor of the Time Style section. Like, all these people were there, and I was friends with them, and we were all doing stuff together. Jorge Ignacio Cortinas, the playwright. So it's, I guess, I don't even know that kind of city experience is available there now. I'm not sure. I think that's what people are trying to protect, in a sense. But it was definitely, I was a very cynical young man there, and I remember thinking of it as like a Epcot center of countercultural revolutions from the past. That's what I thought of San Francisco as then, which is a really impolite way of thinking about the way in which those places had all fought to offer their history to young people, which is really the value of it. And I think that I can see now is that I was able to learn from the Beats and the hippies and the gay sexual revolution of the 70s and the lesbian cultural movements that had created publishing houses and bookstores, and all these different efforts had turned into something that lasted.
That's all we have time for today. But thank you all for coming out tonight. And
gonna
feel
be-
free to buy a book and get it signed in the back of the house.
Thank you so much.